My mother-in-law smoked in the room where my baby slept. My husband blamed me instead, and I was told I was being too sensitive. But when I saw my child lying in the hospital wheezing for air, I knew if we didn't leave, we wouldn't survive. This isn't just a story about divorce. It's a journey to reclaim the very first breath of our lives.
Before we begin this story, let me know where you are listening from in the comments below.
My name is Madeline Carter. I'm 29 years old, and what I'm about to tell you today will forever change the way you see your own family. There are days when a house stops feeling like home long before you have the courage to admit it. For me, it happened slowly, like someone dimming the lights 1 watt at a time until you're sitting in the dark without knowing when it happened. Our home in Fort Worth used to breathe with me. It used to hold my laughter against its walls, absorb the soft humming I sang to Leo, echo the little clinks of Brandon and me making late-night pasta because we were too tired to cook real meals. I used to know every corner of this place. Now the walls feel taller, colder, as if they're leaning in, not to protect me, but to witness something unravel. Everything changed the day Barbara stepped over the threshold. Brandon said it so casually, as if her moving in was a simple favor. "She's just staying a little while, babe. She's excited to help with Leo." The way he said help made it sound like a blessing, and I tried, truly tried, to see it that way. I smiled, nodded, tucked away the uneasy twist in my stomach. But from her first morning in our house, it was clear she hadn't come to help. She had come to manage. I remember walking into the kitchen that first morning to find her already rearranging the cabinets. My coffee mugs, my favorite set with tiny blue brushstroke patterns, were shoved onto a higher shelf, while hers sat neatly within reach. "Oh," I said gently. "I usually keep those lower because—" She didn't even turn fully toward me, just lifted her chin with that tight little smile. "Well, this is more functional." And then she kept moving things. No apology, no consideration, just certainty, cold and confident. By the end of her first week, nothing in the house felt like mine anymore. She moved the couch to give the room better flow. She replaced my soft knitted throw with her sterile beige one. She folded Leo's tiny onesies with the precision of someone entering a competition. Even the candles I lit every night, my small ritual of peace, were replaced with lavender ones because she said, "Brandon always hated that eucalyptus scent." Funny, he'd never said a word to me. The worst part wasn't the changes. It was the way she narrated them. "Brandon's always been a mama's boy," she'd say, smiling like she'd just revealed some shimmering badge of honor. She said it constantly, at breakfast, at dinner, when she handed him a towel, when he came home from work, as if she needed me to remember my place, and that she had been there first. And the way Brandon laughed, light, unbothered, almost proud. It chipped away at me one small piece at a time. But the moment things truly began to fracture was the afternoon I found her smoking outside Leo's room. I still remember the smell before I saw her, the sharp, stale burn of tobacco woven into the air like an old ghost. I followed it down the hallway, my pulse already rising. The nursery door was slightly ajar, and through the gap I saw her perched on the windowsill, cigarette glowing between her fingers. "Barbara," I said quietly, though my voice trembled, "please don't smoke near Leo's room. His lungs—" She turned her head just enough so I could see her lips curve into a smile, dripping with condescension. "In my day, children were raised around real life," she said, exhaling a trail of smoke into the Texas afternoon. "Not bubble-wrapped." And then, almost theatrically, she took another long drag. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen. My body was shaking, not from fear, but something else. Something I couldn't name yet. The version of me who used to speak freely, assertively, felt buried under months of second-guessing. I wanted to shout. I wanted to grab the cigarette and throw it out the window. But instead, I swallowed my breath and walked away. Because I knew that if I stayed, I would either explode or collapse, and neither option would do anything but give her more ammunition. That night, lying in bed beside Brandon, I tried to tell him. "She smoked in Leo's room," I whispered. He didn't even look at me. Instead, he rubbed his forehead. "She probably didn't realize." "She realized," I insisted softly. "She did it while looking right at me." He exhaled sharply. "Madeline, she's old." Why do you keep nitpicking everything she does? Nitpicking. That word sliced through me. I turned toward him fully, hoping to catch his eyes, hoping he might see the fear I had been choking down daily. She's undermining me as a mother. She changes things without asking. She ignores boundaries. He cut me off. You're being dramatic. You're just stressed. And that was the moment I felt something I never expected. Something heavy and cracking settle inside me. My marriage wasn't slipping. It had slipped. Over the next few weeks, the tension turned thicker, almost tangible. Barbara moved more boldly, walking through the house like she owned each floorboard. She criticized how I folded towels, called Leo my angel in a way that felt like a claim. She even made comments about my career break. Interior design is a hobby. Being a mother is real work. As if I hadn't poured my entire heart into both. One morning, she walked into the nursery while I was changing Leo and said, "You really should stop picking him up so much. You're making him soft." Before I could respond, she reached out to touch his cheek, and Leo, my sweet baby, turned his face away from her. That small movement, innocent and instinctive, twisted something inside me, a warning, a whisper. He feels it too. That evening, after another long day of swallowing her disrespect, I stood alone in the kitchen with the baby monitor glowing beside me. The room was quiet, but my mind wasn't. Barbara's voice floated in from the living room as she spoke to Brandon. "She's trying, but she's overwhelmed. You need to guide her. She's so emotional." I stared at my reflection in the dark window, barely recognizing the woman looking back. My once bright eyes looked muted, washed out. My shoulders sagged, as if carrying invisible weights. When had I become so small? I touched the edge of the counter just to steady myself, the cool surface grounding me. A single thought pushed through the fog. This is not love. This is not help. This is control. And beneath that realization, something else began to awaken, quiet, steady, almost frighteningly calm. A boundary, a line, a truth. I didn't know it then, but this was the first moment I began to fight for myself again. Not with shouting, not with bitterness, but with awakening. The air in the house still smelled faintly of smoke. But for the first time, I recognized it not as a nuisance, but as a warning flare. Something in my life was about to burn. And maybe, just maybe, it needed to. People think abuse begins with yelling, slamming doors, or bruises blooming in purple maps across skin. But mine began with questions. Questions whispered by my own mind. Questions planted by the two people who claimed to love me. Questions so subtle, I didn't notice them rooting until they choked the air around me. By the time Barbara had lived with us for a month, I felt like I was shrinking inside a house that suddenly had no corners safe from her opinions, her rules, her judgment. She moved through our home as if she'd been waiting years to take her throne. I watched her transform each space to her liking, like a queen reclaiming territory she believed had been wrongly loaned to me. Every morning began the same way. Barbara already awake, already cooking, already criticizing. "You slept late again," she'd say, even though it was barely 7 a.m. "No wonder the baby's fussy. Babies feel their mother's instability," I used to argue gently. Then I stopped. Arguing felt like talking into a canyon. My voice would go out, but nothing came back except echoes of what she wanted me to believe about myself. One morning, I walked into the kitchen to find her spooning thick gravy into Leo's bowl. My heart lurched. "Barbara, no, he's not supposed to have that. It's too heavy for him." She looked at me like I was a child interrupting an adult conversation. "It's a taste," she said. "Back in my day, babies ate what the family ate. That's why they grew strong." "He's not ready," I insisted. She ignored me, completely ignored me, and moved the spoon closer. I rushed forward and snatched the bowl away before she could feed him. Leo startled and whimpered. My hands shook. "Barbara, stop. I've told you he can choke." She rolled her eyes. "You're making him weak. Little boys need real food and real discipline. Not all this modern nonsense." I walked out with Leo pressed against my chest, my heart pounding so hard I felt it in my teeth. I waited until I reached the bedroom before I let myself breathe again. That afternoon, I tried once more to talk to Brandon. "She tried to feed him gravy this morning." He didn't look up from his laptop. So, Brandon, he can choke." She raised me just fine. You're acting like she's trying to poison him. It was the way he said it, flat, dismissive, that made me falter. As if my fears were tasteless, exaggerated stories I'd invented for drama. Then came the blow that left a hairline fracture in my heart. You're making everything harder than it needs to be. You're too emotional lately. Too emotional. The phrase clung to my skin like smoke. Later that evening, I found Barbara standing over Leo's crib, her hand hovering over his chest. Not touching him, just watching him breathe. Her face was blank, unreadable. When she noticed me, she jerked back like she'd been caught stealing. "You scared?" "Me," she said too quickly. "I was just checking on him. You know how fragile he is." Fragile. Another Barb dressed as concern. I should have said something. Should have told her to stay out of his room. But every time I prepared to set a boundary, I felt myself folding, like someone had taken the spine out of my words. Gaslighting doesn't start with lies. It starts with doubt. Little seeds dropped into your mind. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I misread her tone. Maybe Brandon's right. Maybe I'm tired, hormonal, dramatic. And slowly, you stop trusting yourself. The more Barbara crossed boundaries, the more Brandon defended her. Not once did he pause to ask how I felt. Whenever I brought up something she did, he either minimized it, explained it away, or turned it back on me. "You're misunderstanding her. You're too sensitive. You need to calm down. She's helping, and you're fighting help." It got worse the night I found Barbara asleep in our bed. I stood in the doorway, stunned. She was curled on my side of the mattress, wrapped in our comforter. Brandon sat on the floor with his laptop. "What is this?" I breathed. "She said the guest bed hurts her back," Brandon replied casually. "She needed rest." "So you let her sleep in our bed, in my place?" "She's tired, Maddie. Why do you always make everything a problem?" Everything inside me went silent. Not calm, silent. Like emotions had stepped back, watching from a distance. I slept on the nursery floor that night, my knees tucked to my chest. Leo's soft breathing the only thing tethering me to myself. I stared at the ceiling and thought, this is not marriage, this is survival. But the real unraveling began when Barbara started controlling even the smallest parts of my routine. She walked in while I showered, twice, claiming she needed her lotion. She opened packages addressed to me without permission. She threw away my almond milk because healthy substitutes are nonsense. She replaced my soft nursery mobile with an old-fashioned one that played tinny lullabies. Every time I asked her to stop, she said I was overreacting. Every time I asked Brandon for help, he said I was overreacting. When two people repeat the same lie long enough, it starts to echo in your own voice. I felt myself slipping, slowly, terrifyingly, into a version of me I didn't recognize. Someone quieter, someone hesitant. Someone who kept apologizing for things she hadn't done. The lowest moment came on a stormy Friday night. Leo had fallen asleep early. I walked into the living room to find Barbara whispering sharply to Brandon. "She's unstable," she said. "You need to take control before she ruins the boy." My breath caught. I froze behind the hallway corner. Brandon didn't defend me. He didn't correct her. He didn't even hesitate. "She's been difficult," he whispered back. Difficult. As if I were a task, a burden, a problem to be managed. I stepped back before they could see me and shut myself in the bathroom. I sat on the cold tile, hands trembling, breath shallow. My reflection in the mirror was frightening, eyes red, lips pale, shoulders sagging like a woman twice my age. But there was something else in that reflection, a flicker, a spark, a warning. I was disappearing. And if I didn't do something, I would vanish entirely. Later that night, when Brandon came to bed, I didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't try to explain myself or beg for empathy. I simply said, "I don't feel safe here anymore." He scoffed. "Safe? Stop being dramatic." I looked at him, and for the first time, I realized he wasn't on my side. Not even close. "No, Brandon," I whispered. "I'm not being dramatic. I'm being honest." He rolled to face the wall. "If you keep this up, you'll tear this family apart." But the truth was simple. The family was already breaking. Barbara had a hammer. Brandon handed her the nails, and I was finally beginning to see the structure collapsing. This wasn't me spiraling. This was me waking up. The cough started as a whisper. At first, it was just a small sound in the middle of the night. Dry, quick, almost like Leo clearing his throat in his sleep. I told myself it was the weather, the AC, teething, anything but what I feared it might be. But by the end of that week, it became a rasp. A stubborn, wheezing rattle that twisted my stomach every time I heard it. Barbara waved it off, of course. "He's fine," she said, scooping Leo up without asking. "Babies cough. It builds immunity." I tried not to snap. "He's been coughing for 4 nights straight, Barbara. It's getting worse," she smirked, rocking Leo on her hip like she'd done this 1,000 times. "He's just fussy because you're anxious. Babies feed off energy. Try calming down." It took every ounce of strength in me not to scream. By Sunday morning, Leo woke up coughing so hard he couldn't catch his breath. His tiny face turned red. His chest struggled to rise evenly. That was it. I didn't wait for Brandon's approval. I grabbed the diaper bag, wrapped Leo in a blanket, and drove to his pediatrician without telling anyone where I was going. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I kept glancing in the mirror, watching his tiny chest rise and fall in short, uneven bursts. Dr. Kerr, our pediatrician, took one look at Leo and furrowed her brow. "He's laboring to breathe," she said gently, stethoscope already pressed to his chest. "Let me listen for a minute." The room fell quiet, except for Leo's shallow wheezes. She pulled back, her tone firm but kind. "He has bronchial inflammation, likely viral bronchitis, but it's being made worse by something in his environment. Is there any chance he's been exposed to secondhand smoke?" My stomach dropped. I swallowed hard. "Yes," I whispered. "His grandmother. She smokes. I've asked her to stop, but she does it near the nursery window." Dr. Kerr didn't flinch. She simply nodded and wrote something on her chart. "That's likely the aggravator. He's sensitive, and this could have turned dangerous fast. You need to eliminate the source immediately." Her words hit me harder than any slap could. Not because they shocked me, but because they confirmed everything I already knew. I held Leo tighter that night, rocked him for over an hour in the nursery chair, even after his cough had softened into sleep. His warm cheek against my shoulder, his breath finally even. I pressed my lips to his forehead and made a vow I wouldn't break. This ends now. I waited until Brandon got home from work. I met him at the door. "We need to talk." He looked up, already annoyed. "Can it wait? No," I said firmly. "Leo's been diagnosed with bronchial inflammation. The doctor said secondhand smoke is making it worse. Barbara is endangering his health." He blinked, surprised. "What?" "She smokes outside his window. She's ignoring everything I've said. This isn't just about me anymore, Brandon. It's about our child." He exhaled, slow and disbelieving. "So what do you want me to do? Kick my mother out?" I stared at him, heart pounding. "Yes, that's exactly what I want." He rubbed his hands through his hair. "Madeline, be reasonable. She's endangering our son's health. What's unreasonable is that you've allowed this to go on this long." He stepped back, voice rising. "You're being manipulative. This isn't abuse. This is you using our child to control the situation." "Control the situation," I repeated, stunned. "You invited her in. You ignored me every time I begged for help. And now that a doctor is telling us Leo's health is in danger, you still won't protect him." Brandon's face twisted. "You're making this into a war." I took a breath. My voice didn't shake this time. "If she doesn't leave, I will. And I will take Leo with me." His eyes narrowed. "Is that a threat?" "No, it's a boundary." That was when Barbara appeared at the top of the stairs, her face red, voice trembling with rage. "You ungrateful little girl," she snapped. "After everything I've done for this family, after all the help I've given you, you dare to accuse me of hurting your child?" "You did hurt him," I said calmly, "and you knew you were doing it." She pointed a finger at me, her voice rising to a shriek. "You've poisoned my son's mind. You've turned him against his family. You're a manipulative, cold-hearted, unstable woman. I should have known the day Brandon married you that you weren't built for motherhood." I felt Brandon's presence behind me, but he didn't say a word. Barbara wasn't done. "I gave up my life to be here, to help you, and this is how you repay me? By slandering me and trying to throw me out like garbage? You're disgusting." My hands were cold. my breath shallow, but I stood firm. I want you out of this house, tonight. Barbara's face contorted in rage. You don't own this house. And then, in a whisper that chilled me to the bone, she muttered, I'll never leave my son to a woman like you. I turned to Brandon. Say something. Tell her she has to go. He stared at the floor, then up at me. And what he said next, I will never forget. You've caused enough damage. You've torn this family apart. It felt like someone had hit me with a steel bat. I had fought, I had cried, I had begged. And in the end, he still chose her. Not me. Not Leo. Her. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just looked at him, at the man I once believed would protect me through anything, and realized that he was already gone. The man I married no longer existed. Something broke inside me then. Something final. I walked into the nursery, picked up Leo, who stirred slightly but didn't wake. His little body felt heavier than ever against my chest, like the weight of every decision I had to make from now on. I stood there, holding my son, heart thudding against his back, and I whispered, You don't have to worry, baby. Mommy sees everything now. Some houses don't fall apart with a crash. Some die slowly, in silence, with drawer handles rearranged, with routines rewritten, with love replaced by something that looks similar but smells like smoke and feels like suffocation. That was my house. Our house. When we bought the home in Fort Worth, it was a fresh start. 3 bedrooms, a wide porch, a lemon tree in the backyard. I painted Leo's nursery myself, while 6 months pregnant, humming along to Ella Fitzgerald as I traced blue stars on the ceiling. The walls felt warm, like they were made to hold us. Brandon and I would stay up late talking about the future, Leo's first words, our dream of starting a side business together, maybe even building a sunroom. But that warmth started fading the day Barbara arrived. Brandon's mom came under the pretense of helping out for a few weeks after I gave birth. The plan was temporary, or at least that's what I was told. I didn't resist it at first. I was exhausted, hormonal, overwhelmed. Maybe an extra pair of hands wasn't the worst idea. But Barbara didn't come with helping hands. She came with quiet ambition. The first red flag was the couch. She moved it, not suggested it, moved it. While I was in the shower, she rearranged the living room, explaining afterward. This makes more sense, honey. Brandon always liked things this way growing up. Right, sweetie. Brandon smiled at her. Guess I did. I said nothing. Just stared at the new setup, which now blocked the corner where I nursed Leo each morning. The second flag was the meals. She took over the kitchen like a commander reclaiming territory. I came downstairs to the smell of bacon grease instead of oatmeal, her voice singing an old country tune while she stirred a heavy skillet. Let the boy try real food, she'd say, as she prepared a thick puree I'd never allow. Back in the day, we didn't fuss with all these new rules. Brandon turned out just fine. When I politely reminded her about Leo's diet and the doctor's notes, she smiled without teeth. Doctors change their minds every decade, but a mother's instinct? That never goes out of style. By mother, she meant herself. She always did. That first week, she started calling Leo my little angel in front of Brandon, like I wasn't standing right there. She'd change his outfit after I dressed him, saying, This color suits him better, don't you think? She'd re-rock him to sleep after I laid him down, as if correcting something broken. I told myself it was nothing. She was old-fashioned. Controlling, yes, but she meant well. I bit my tongue and reminded myself she'd be gone soon. But the truth settled in like mildew. She wasn't planning to leave. And Brandon? He didn't seem to notice, or worse, he didn't care. He worked long hours at the IT firm, and when he came home, he melted into the couch next to her like they'd never been apart. She'd ask about his day while I cleaned bottles and tried to shush a crying baby. They laughed about old memories while I silently folded laundry in the next room. I was the shadow, the maid, the woman raising her grandson in the background. I started to fade. Then came the moment I'll never forget. The smell of cigarette smoke. It was a Tuesday, warm, sunny, the kind of Texas morning that carries a breeze. I had just laid Leo down for his nap when something caught in my throat. I sniffed. Again, smoke. Not from the kitchen, not the neighbor's grill. Tobacco. I followed it upstairs like a warning bell. Leo's window was slightly cracked. I pushed the door open gently, and there she was, Barbara, leaning against the nursery window frame, cigarette between two fingers, exhaling calmly as if she were standing on the porch of a bar, not beside a sleeping baby. I froze. "Barbara," I said, my voice almost trembling. "Please don't smoke near Leo's room. His lungs." She didn't flinch, didn't drop the cigarette, just turned her head slowly, eyes narrow, lips curving into that familiar smirk. "Back in my day, kids were raised around cigarette smoke, dirt, and real life," she said. "They grew up stronger for it. Not all this bubble wrap parenting." And then she took another long drag. It wasn't what she said. It was the deliberate disrespect behind it. The way she looked right at me and did it anyway. I didn't scream. I didn't snatch the cigarette. I just walked out of the room, heart pounding, bile rising in my throat. That night, I brought it up to Brandon. "She smoked in Leo's room." He looked up from his phone, confused. "What?" "She stood right there and smoked by the open window." He rubbed his forehead. "I'm sure she didn't mean any harm. She probably didn't even think about it. She looked me in the eye while doing it." He sighed, annoyed. "She's old, Maddie. You can't expect her to change overnight. She's risking Leo's health." "You're being dramatic." That word again, dramatic. The gaslight flickered. I felt my stomach turn. Not from anger, from despair. I turned on my side and faced the wall. Brandon didn't apologize. He didn't come closer. He just fell asleep within minutes, snoring lightly. I laid awake for hours, blinking into the dark, wondering what had happened to the man who once cried at our wedding vows. In the following days, things only got worse. Barbara started calling herself Mama when talking to Leo. "Oh, Mama's boy needs his bottle." It made my skin crawl. I tried setting boundaries, I asked politely. I wrote down Leo's routine and taped it on the fridge. I offered to switch off duties, suggested she rest more, encouraged her to take walks or visit friends. She ignored all of it. Worse, Brandon defended her every time. "You're stressing too much. She's just trying to help. Why are you always so negative?" It was like screaming into a storm. I began spending more time in the nursery with the door closed, rocking Leo while the distant sounds of Barbara's voice echoed downstairs. I found peace in the tiny rhythms, bottles, lullabies, the soft thump of his heart against mine. Leo was my anchor, my reason, the one person in that house who still saw me as enough. Still, every time I walked past the mirror, I looked more hollow, less color in my face, less light in my eyes. One night, I stood in the kitchen after everyone had gone to bed. I sipped cold tea and stared at the baby monitor. Leo was asleep, safe for now. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something inside me had shifted permanently. I was no longer confused. I was no longer questioning. I was awake. This wasn't help. This wasn't family. This wasn't love. It was control, disrespect, invasion. And Brandon? He wasn't oblivious. He was complicit. That night, I whispered into the dark, "I see it now." I don't think I was talking to anyone. Maybe I was talking to myself. Or maybe, finally, I was talking to the woman inside me who had been quiet too long. The moment my father's car pulled away from that house, I felt something inside me unclench. Not fully, just a little. Just enough to let my lungs expand in a way they hadn't for months. Leo slept soundly beside me, his tiny chest rising and falling in soft, steady rhythms that felt like a heartbeat guiding me home. I kept my hand on his leg the entire ride, afraid that if I let go, something terrible would happen, as if the nightmare I left behind might chase after us. Frank didn't say a word, and yet I felt more heard sitting in that quiet car than in all the nights I had cried myself to sleep beside Brandon. The hum of the tires against the road, the soft ticking of the blinker, the gentle rattle of Leo's pacifier. Those were the sounds of safety, familiar, solid, real. Frank glanced at me once at a red light, his jaw set in that way he had when he was forcing himself not to show emotion. "You good?" he asked simply. I wasn't, but for the first time in months, I felt like I could be, so I just nodded. When we pulled into his apartment complex in Arlington, the sun was sliding behind the buildings, painting the sky with streaks of orange and gold. The air was clean, so clean. No smoke, no tension, no cold stares waiting for me behind the door. Just a quiet building, a second-floor unit with a porch light. Frank always forgot to turn off. A place where nothing in the air wanted to hurt my child. I stepped out of the car, and the moment my feet touched the ground, I inhaled deeply. It felt like the first real breath I'd taken in months. Not sharp, not painful, but full. Healing. Frank opened the trunk and pulled out my bag. "You go ahead, I'll bring the rest." I climbed the stairs slowly, cradling Leo close. Every step felt like shedding another layer of fear. Inside, the apartment smelled like pine cleaner and old leather. My father was not a man of luxury, never had been, but everything in his home was clean, intentional, sturdy. The kind of place where nothing was designed to impress, only to comfort. There were photos lining the hallway, some of me, some of him and Mom. Some of the three of us before life had a chance to steal her too soon. I felt my throat tighten. This was home. In a way my own house had stopped being long ago. I placed Leo gently in the middle of Frank's bed, constructing a safe little nest with pillows so he wouldn't roll. He didn't stir. He looked peaceful, so heartbreakingly peaceful. I ran my fingers across his cheek. "You're safe, baby. Mommy's got you." Frank stepped inside, set the bags down, and disappeared into the hallway for a moment. When he returned, he held a small cedar box. "I've been meaning to give you this," he said, handing it to me carefully, almost ceremonially. The box was smooth but worn, edges rounded by years of being opened and closed by loving hands. My mother's hands. I sat down on the couch, positioned Leo beside me, and opened it. Inside was a single photograph. My mother holding me on her hip, hair wild from the wind, laughing at something just outside the frame, like the world had told her a secret she could barely contain. Under the photo was a delicate gold locket, oval-shaped, engraved with tiny vines curling around the edges. I touched it gingerly, afraid it might crumble from the weight of years and memories. "She wore that every day," Frank said, voice softer than I'd heard in a long time. She said it made her feel grounded. Like no matter what was happening, a part of her stayed steady. I blinked hard, trying not to cry. "I didn't know you still had this." "There's a lot you don't know," he said quietly. "I kept things to myself after your mom passed. I didn't want to weigh you down." His voice cracked slightly, just enough for me to notice. "You're not weighing me down," I whispered. "You're holding me up." We sat in silence for a few moments, the only sound Leo's soft breathing. Then Frank said, "You did the right thing, Maddie." I swallowed. "I feel like I failed." "You didn't fail. You survived." That word, survived, hit me in a place I hadn't touched yet. Survival wasn't something I thought I needed. I thought I was simply enduring a rough patch, a difficult period, a clash of personalities. But now, sitting in my father's living room with the echo of Barbara's cruelty still clinging to my skin, I realized I hadn't been living, I had been enduring. And enduring is just a softer word for drowning. Frank rested a hand on my shoulder. "You're not going back there." "No," I said firmly, "I'm not." The next morning, sunlight spilled through the windows, warm and bright. It felt different from the sunlight in Fort Worth, lighter somehow, less filtered through fear. Leo woke up smiling, reaching for my face with his tiny hands. It had been so long since I saw him smile without tension behind his little eyes. I held him tightly, breathing in the baby blue scent of his pajamas. Frank came in with 2 mugs of coffee. "You got any plans today?" I nodded. "Yeah, I'm meeting someone." Jordan Clark's office smelled like fresh paper and peppermint gum. She greeted me with a firm handshake, her posture straight, her eyes sharp. The kind of woman who walked into a courtroom and made men twice her size shrink. I told her everything, every detail, even the ones that made me feel fragile or stupid or ashamed. She didn't blink. She didn't judge. She only wrote notes with increasing purpose. When I finished, she closed her notebook. "Madeline," she said, "I want you to hear me clearly." I straightened. "You're not crazy. You're not exaggerating. You're not unstable. You are a woman who has been emotionally, psychologically, and yes, physically abused. And now, your son is at risk." My eyes burned. "Here's what we do next," she continued. "We gather evidence, legally and thoroughly. Evidence. Cameras, audio, documentation. Anything that shows the truth you've been living. Once we have it, we'll build a case. Custody, protection, housing, finances. You will not walk into this battle alone. I exhaled. A long, shuddering breath I didn't know I was holding. Frank can help fund what we need, I said quietly. He already offered. Jordan smiled, not unkindly. Good. This will take strength. And strategy. I left her office with something I hadn't felt in months, a plan, a real one. Back at the apartment, Frank sat on the couch assembling a small black security camera. You ready to take the next step? He asked. I nodded. But that nod wasn't just an answer, it was a declaration. I wasn't just going to survive anymore. I was going to fight. For Leo, for myself. For the life Barbara and Brandon tried to suffocate out of me. As the sun dipped low and the room filled with warm copper light, I placed my mother's locket around my neck. It settled perfectly against my collarbone, as if it had been waiting to return home. Mom, I whispered under my breath, I hope you're proud of me. And for the first time in a very long time, I believed she would be. There's a moment, just before you decide to fight back, when the fear is louder than your heartbeat. You question whether it's worth it, whether you're strong enough, whether anyone will believe you, and then you remember. You've already survived worse. So you steady your hands, and you press record. That's how it began. Back at Frank's, I laid out a plan with Jordan Clark, my attorney, my guide, my unexpected lighthouse in a fog of gaslighting. She brought clarity in the most matter-of-fact tone. We need evidence, not emotion. You already have the truth. We just have to catch it on tape. Frank sat beside me, arms folded, his expression unreadable but unwavering. Jordan continued. You said she smoked inside, yes? Ignored safety. Belittled you? Perfect. Hidden camera, audio recorder, and a list of questions you bait out subtly. We're not provoking, we're uncovering. I nodded slowly. How do I get it without making her suspicious? She smiled faintly. Barbara seems like the type who loves to talk, especially when she thinks she's won. She wasn't wrong. 2 days later, I returned to the house, not with hope, not with forgiveness, but with a camera in my purse and a tiny voice recorder clipped into Leo's diaper bag. Barbara greeted me with a raised brow and a smirk. Back so soon? She asked. I just came to grab some things, I replied evenly. And talk. She stepped aside. Brandon's not home. That's okay. It's you I needed to see. Her eyes flickered. I set Leo in his playpen in the living room and sat down on the edge of the couch, angling my body just enough to ensure the camera, disguised as a charger brick in the wall, had a clear view. Barbara busied herself in the kitchen, but her voice carried. Such drama lately, she muttered. You'd think you were the only mother to ever feel overwhelmed. But no, you had to drag Frank into it. Make a spectacle. I didn't rise to the bait. Instead, I said gently, I found a few papers in the desk the last time I was here. Insurance policies with my name scratched off. Her hand stopped moving, then resumed, slower. Oh? Must have been a mistake, she said too quickly. You probably misread. And the bank notices, the mortgage updates? Where are they? I told Brandon they looked like junk. He trusts me to sort the important things. There it was, the first thread unraveling. You've been managing our mail? I've been helping, she snapped. Someone had to. You were too busy crying in corners. She came back into the room and sat across from me. There was no mask left, just open contempt. You don't understand family, she said. You think being a mother is about soft voices and Pinterest nurseries. But real mothers sacrifice. They endure. You run away and cry abuse when someone tells you the truth. My heart was pounding, but not from fear, from something colder, sharper, control. Barbara wasn't careless, she was calculated. I waited, let the silence hang. Then I asked, Did you tell Brandon to remove my name from the policy? She didn't even flinch. I suggested it. Financial decisions require stability, and well, let's be honest, Madeline. You're not exactly dependable lately. I stared at her. And the mail? She leaned back, eyes narrowing. You really think it matters now? Yes, because it was all being recorded. Back at Frank's that night, I handed the USB to Jordan. She plugged it into her laptop. We sat together listening to Barbara's voice fill the room. I've been helping, someone had to. She's not dependable lately. I suggested it. Each line was a nail in the coffin. Jordan didn't smile, but her eyes gleamed. This is manipulation, obstruction, and unauthorized access to financial documents. She may have signed things on his behalf. That's forgery. I pulled out the photos I'd taken from Brandon's drawer the week before. Policies with scratched-out names, an altered beneficiary form, a savings account and only his and Barbara's names. Jordan laid them all out like puzzle pieces. She isolated you financially. She convinced Brandon to rewrite your legal stake in the home. And she controlled your access to mail, money, and medical decisions. She looked up at me. This isn't just emotional abuse anymore. It's financial coercion. And if we play it right, it's going to cost them. I blinked. Cost them how? We can file for exclusive use of the property. Petition for full custody based on endangerment. Press criminal charges if we find forged signatures. Criminal, the word landed heavy. I didn't want revenge. I didn't need her in jail. But I did need freedom. Legal, emotional, psychological. I needed to make sure Leo never breathed in that poison again, literal or otherwise. Frank supported everything without hesitation. He paid for the private tech specialist Jordan recommended, a woman named Ellis who installed 2 more hidden audio devices and pulled metadata from Barbara's old emails on a shared computer. She found proof of intercepted notices, rent overages billed to me and never disclosed. Even a nasty little thread between Barbara and Brandon, where they joked about me being too soft to handle money. Soft. That word used to sting. Now, it sharpened me. One night, while reviewing the files, I found something that stopped me cold. A voice memo, dated weeks ago. A conversation between Barbara and Brandon, recorded accidentally on a phone left on the kitchen counter. Brandon. She's emotional again, threatening to leave. Barbara. Let her. She always crawls back. Once the money tightens, she'll have no choice. Brandon. You think we should have told her about the refinance? Barbara. Why? It's not like she understands any of it. My hands clenched into fists. My whole body went still. They weren't just passive. They were planning. Undermining me wasn't collateral damage. It was the strategy. Jordan filed the first round of paperwork the next morning. Temporary custody petition, financial injunctions, document preservation requests. By the end of the day, Brandon's email received a formal notice. The silence from him was deafening. No reply. No calls. Barbara sent a text at midnight. You'll regret this. We gave you everything. I read it once, deleted it. Then I took the locket from my neck, opened it, and placed the tiniest copy of Leo's photo inside, opposite my mother's. 2 generations, 1 breath apart. A legacy that would not be broken. That night, I stood at the window of Frank's apartment, the city lights flickering like distant stars. Leo slept nearby. Frank watched TV with the volume low. I stood there in the quiet, holding the USB that now held the evidence of everything they'd done. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't begged. I hadn't fought dirty. I simply observed, documented, prepared. I thought about how they tried to make me feel small. And now, all I could think was, they should have been more careful. The day I walked back into that house, I wasn't the same woman who had left it trembling, cradling a baby and a broken spirit. I had evidence. I had a legal team. I had a father who stood by my side like a silent pillar of justice. But most importantly, I had clarity. Clarity sharpens everything, your voice, your spine, your sense of what you will and will not accept ever again. Frank pulled into the driveway and killed the engine. You sure you want to do this? He asked. Eyes locked on the house like it was a scene from a war movie. I nodded. It's not about want. It's about need. Beside me, Jordan Clark stepped out of her car, calm, impeccably dressed. A portfolio in one hand, quiet fire in her eyes. We approached the front door together. I didn't knock. I used my key one last time and walked in like the woman who belonged there. Barbara was on the couch. She looked up from a bowl of cereal with the smug calm of someone still convinced they had the upper hand. Back again, she said. Should I fetch the tissues now or after the performance? I didn't answer. I set my bag down and looked around the room. Everything looked the same, but I wasn't. Frank stood in the corner, silent. Jordan stepped forward. "We're here for 3 things," she said crisply. 1. Barbara needs to vacate the property immediately. 2. Brandon needs to sign the temporary custody agreement. 3. Madeline will be taking all her personal documents and items today. Barbara laughed. "You've got to be kidding me." I turned toward her, voice steady. "No, Barbara. We're done playing games. You endangered my son. You tampered with financial documents. You intercepted my mail. And you hit a line you can't walk back from." She stood slowly, eyes narrowing. "This is my son's house, my family. You can't just walk in with your little lawyer and bark orders." Jordan held up the documents. "This court order says otherwise. You've been served, Miss Carter." That name, Ms. Carter, hit Barbara like a slap. She turned to Frank. "You're really going along with this? Your daughter's throwing away her marriage and dragging your grandson through court battles because she doesn't like sharing a house?" Frank said nothing, just stared her down like a storm on legs. Then Brandon came downstairs. He was barefoot, half asleep, shirt wrinkled, hair a mess. He looked at the 3 of us like we'd walked into his dream. "What is this?" Jordan stepped in. "Brandon Carter, I'm Jordan Clark, attorney representing Madeline Carter. You've been served with a petition for temporary custody, supported by audio and video evidence of emotional and financial abuse conducted in this household. You have 2 choices: sign the agreement, or we proceed to court next week." Brandon blinked. "What the hell are you talking about?" I reached into my bag and pulled out the USB. "This holds recordings of your mother admitting to withholding mail, interfering with our finances, and smoking near our child." He stepped back, his face pale. "You were spying on us?" "No," I said softly. "I was protecting myself." "And Leo?" Barbara exploded. "You manipulated this entire situation. You always needed someone to blame for your own weakness." Jordan didn't flinch. "Miss Carter, I'd advise you not to speak further without counsel. You're very close to perjury and criminal fraud." Brandon pointed a finger at me. "You're trying to take my son from me." "No," I said. "You gave him up the moment you turned your back while your mother endangered him. You chose silence, and silence is complicity." He looked like he wanted to argue, but then he hesitated. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "Your signature," Jordan said, "and her departure." Barbara paced. "I'm not going anywhere. You think you can just erase me from his life? From your life?" "I'm not erasing you," I said. "I'm walking away from you." She stared at me, eyes narrowing like a predator. And then she played her last card. "I'm calling the police." My heart skipped, but I stood still. "For what?" Jordan asked. Barbara raised her voice. "She assaulted me. She shoved me 2 weeks ago. I have bruises. And she stole a necklace from me when she left." Jordan raised an eyebrow. "False police reports are felonies." Barbara stormed to the kitchen and picked up the phone anyway. Frank moved in front of me instinctively. Moments later, the police arrived. 2 officers, calm, professional. 1 male, 1 female. They listened as Barbara ranted, pointing at me, screaming about assault and stolen jewelry. "She's dangerous," Barbara shrieked. "She's unstable. Ask Brandon." The officers turned to him, and for the first time, he looked unsure. "Did you witness your wife assault your mother?" they asked. Brandon shifted. He glanced at me, then back at Barbara. "No," he said slowly. "No, I didn't." Barbara's jaw dropped. "What? Brandon?" He looked down, and I saw it, that flicker of guilt, of clarity. It was too late, of course, but it was there. After reviewing Jordan's documents and confirming the court order, the officers asked Barbara to pack her belongings and leave the premises within 24 hours. She screamed. She threatened. She promised revenge, but she left. Brandon signed the temporary custody agreement in silence. I didn't speak to him again that day. Didn't offer closure, didn't ask for it, because I no longer needed it. I stood in Leo's room, packing his tiny clothes, his books, his giraffe nightlight. And as I zipped the last bag shut, I felt lighter, not because the pain was gone, but because I wasn't carrying it alone anymore. I walked out of that house with Leo in my arms, Frank at my side, and Jordan behind me, and this time, I wasn't looking back. The moment the police car pulled into Frank's driveway, my fingers went ice cold. I was holding Leo, gently rocking him after his nap, when I heard the tires crunch over the gravel. I peeked through the blinds and saw two uniformed officers stepping out, one male, one female. I didn't panic, I didn't cry. I just exhaled, slow, steady. Because I knew this was Barbara's move. She was loud, vindictive, and she had one strategy left. Make me look unstable, make me look dangerous, the exact story she'd been planting since day one. Frank opened the door before they knocked. "Can I help you?" The younger officer stepped forward. "We're looking for Madeline Carter. We received a report alleging theft and physical assault. We'd like to ask a few questions." Frank turned toward me calmly. "They want to talk to you." I nodded and came to the door with Leo still resting against my shoulder. I didn't flinch. "I'm Madeline Carter," I said, "and I know exactly what this is about." They asked me to step outside. I handed Leo to Frank and followed them to the edge of the porch. Barbara had accused me of assaulting her during the last confrontation at the house, said I shoved her into a doorframe and stormed off with her jewelry, claimed she had a bruise, claimed I screamed threats and left her shaken and afraid. It was all so dramatic, and so precisely her. I kept my voice steady. There were 3 people in the house that day: my attorney, my father, and myself. All of us witnessed what happened. No one was touched, no jewelry was taken. The female officer scribbled notes. "Do you have any evidence to support that?" I smiled, cool and even. "Yes," I said. "I have everything." Back inside, I pulled out the labeled USB drive Jordan had prepared. It contained the full video and audio from the hidden cameras. Clean footage. Time-stamped. Legally obtained. I handed it to the officer. "She's not just lying," I said. "She's weaponizing the system because she lost control. She's retaliating." They watched a portion of the footage right there on Frank's laptop. Barbara screaming, cursing, accusing. Frank standing silent like a statue. Jordan stepping between us. No physical contact. No stolen item. Just venom. And then, Barbara's own words on tape. "She's unstable. You need to make her look dangerous." The officer sat back. "Well," he said, "that paints a very different picture." I nodded. "Yes, it does." They took the USB, logged everything for official review, and left with apologies I didn't need. Because I didn't want sorry, I wanted proof that the truth still mattered. The next morning, Jordan called. "Barbara's false report is under investigation. If she doesn't withdraw it, they'll file a formal complaint. Criminal misuse of police resources. Possibly defamation." I closed my eyes and let that sink in. She tried to paint me as a threat, and now the law was staring her in the face, but she wasn't done. Barbara always had one last storm to throw. That afternoon, she showed up in the parking lot of Frank's apartment complex. She didn't call, didn't text, just stood near my car, arms folded, pacing like a restless spirit. Frank saw her through the kitchen window. "You want me to handle it?" "No," I said. "I need to face this." I stepped outside with Leo on my hip, my feet steady on the concrete. Barbara's face twisted into a mockery of a smile. "So this is how it ends? You lying, you twisting the system, you dragging my name through the mud." "No," I said softly. "This is how it starts. With truth." She took a step forward. "I gave you everything. I gave Brandon stability. I kept your household afloat." "You poisoned my son's lungs," I said. "You stripped me of access to my own finances. You made me doubt myself every single day." "Because you're weak." "No," I said, "because I was trying to keep peace in a war I didn't start." She didn't like that answer. "I'll take you down," she hissed. "I'll take full custody from you. I'll ruin you." Frank stepped outside then, calm as ever, standing at my side. "You've already lost," he said quietly. Barbara turned toward him. "And what? You think this makes her some kind of hero?" Frank didn't even blink. "It makes her free." The next day, we were back in court. Not a full trial, but a review session to settle temporary custody terms and financial access after Barbara's false report was dismissed. Brandon sat beside her in the courtroom. Jaw tight, fingers fidgeting. He looked tired, defeated, maybe even ashamed. Jordan played more of the recordings. Barbara's voice blaring through the speaker, full of venom, threats, and admissions. Brandon kept his eyes on the floor. And then, For the first time, the judge turned to him directly. Mr. Carter, are you aware of your mother's interference in your financial and custodial affairs? He hesitated, then nodded. I let it happen. That was all, not an apology, not an explanation, just truth. And it was enough. The judge ruled in my favor, full temporary custody. Barbara barred from all unsupervised contact, a full financial audit of the joint assets, and exclusive use of the marital home until the divorce proceedings concluded. Jordan leaned in and whispered, "That's a win." But it didn't feel like a victory lap. It felt like closure. Outside the courtroom, I passed Barbara on the steps. She didn't yell, didn't curse, didn't even glare. She just sat there, stunned. Still, small. I paused. For a moment, the old version of me, the peacekeeper, the appeaser, wanted to say something soft. But the woman I had become? She just walked on. Because justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks away with its head held high and its baby in its arms. That night, Frank grilled steaks out back. The air smelled like rosemary and safety. Leo sat in a little bouncer under the porch light, clapping along to a country song on the radio. I sat beside my father with a cold drink in hand, and the court papers tucked safely in my purse. And for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I felt like I was living again. The conference room was cold. Not just in temperature, though the air conditioning hummed with a steady vengeance, but in spirit. Everything inside felt sterile. Neutral walls, neutral carpet, neutral faces. But what was happening in that room wasn't neutral. It was the ending of something that once held love, now drained to legal terms and split assets. Brandon sat across from me. He looked different, not in the way someone changes physically, but in that subtle way a person's aura dulls after they've realized their power no longer works on you. He couldn't meet my eyes. Maybe because he knew he no longer owned any piece of the woman sitting in front of him. Jordan, sharp and focused as always, leaned over and slid a folder across the table. Custody, division of property, and financial agreements, all prepared, all legal, all fair. Brandon's attorney looked it over, lips pursed. "We have one condition," he said. Jordan tilted her head. "Of course you do." The man cleared his throat. "No public discussion, no posting on social media, no future claims that could be construed as defamatory. Mutual non-disparagement." I glanced at Jordan. She nodded subtly, but I lifted my chin. "I agree," I said, with one addition. Both attorneys turned toward me. "Barbara Carter will never be permitted any contact with Leo. Not now. Not 10 years from now. Not a visit. Not a call. Not a letter. If she attempts any communication, we file for a permanent restraining order." Brandon's face twitched for the first time. "Come on, Maddie, that's—" "No," I said, calm as stone. "This isn't a negotiation. She lost her right to him the moment she endangered his health and tried to destroy his mother." He opened his mouth like he wanted to fight me, but then he slumped back and nodded. "She's already gone," he muttered. I blinked. "Gone?" He didn't look up. "Back to her brother's place in New Mexico. After the hearing, she packed up overnight. Said she was done being treated like a criminal. I haven't heard from her since." There was no victory in that news. No joy. Only stillness. The rest was clinical. We reviewed documents, confirmed dates, agreed on terms for the sale of the house. I had the right to purchase it outright within 90 days. If not, it would be listed publicly, and we'd split the profits. Jordan offered to help with financing options. I wasn't sure I wanted the house, but I wanted the choice. That was enough for now. Brandon signed each paper quickly, like he was rushing through a job he hated. At one point, his pen hovered, and for the briefest second, I wondered if he'd say something. Offer a weak apology, a broken truth. But he didn't. He just moved on to the next page, and I did the same. When we left, Jordan put a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You good?" I smiled faintly. "Not good, but done." That weekend, I returned to the house alone. The realtor had already begun preparing it for listing, removing personal items, repainting the nursery in neutral tones. The walls were still the same height. The windows still faced west. But something was different. The house was hollow, not empty, hollow. Like a place that had once known a family and now carried only the echo of what was lost. I walked through slowly, each room tugging at me, the kitchen, the hallway, the spot where Brandon once kissed my forehead as I nursed Leo at 3 a.m., the living room where Barbara rearranged the furniture without asking, where I first realized I wasn't the woman of the house, I was the outsider. In the corner near the fireplace, half buried under a box of old receipts, I found it. A ceramic ashtray, off-white, chipped along the rim, the last physical remnant of Barbara. I picked it up, turned it over in my hand. It was heavier than I expected, like it had absorbed the smoke, the tension, the manipulation. I didn't throw it, didn't smash it, didn't scream. I walked outside, dropped it gently into the trash bin by the curb, and closed the lid. Then I dusted my hands off and walked back inside, lighter. Frank met me back at the apartment with Leo already bathed and in his pajamas. He had a good day, he said. We played with the neighbor's dog. He kept calling it Dada, which I tried not to take personally. I laughed. A real laugh. The kind that doesn't rise from happiness exactly, but from something deeper. Release. We ate dinner on paper plates. Leo fell asleep in my lap, while Frank sipped his coffee and told me about a leak in the kitchen faucet. Life was starting to feel regular. And for a woman who had walked through emotional war zones, regular was a gift. The next day, I met with Jordan at the courthouse to file final paperwork confirming the settlement and ensuring court records reflected the terms accurately. Last step, she said, handing me the signed copy. I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't a symbol of marriage ending. It was a certificate of self-ownership. For the first time in years, I belonged only to myself. That evening, I did something I hadn't dared to do in months. I logged back into my old email, the one I had stopped using when Barbara kept checking my phone for baby updates. There were over 300 unread messages, but one subject line stood out. Fort Worth Mothers Support Circle. Welcome. Apparently, I had registered months ago, a form I filled out at 2 a.m. when Leo was sick, and I felt like I might fall apart. I replied. That Thursday, I sat in a folding chair in a church basement surrounded by 6 women. Some were divorced, some widowed, some still in the thick of it, and we talked. About fear, about silence, about how abuse can look like concern and sound like I'm just trying to help. I told them my story. I told them about the cigarette, smoke, the slap, the way I stopped recognizing my own reflection. They didn't flinch. They didn't pity me. They nodded. And when I finished, one of them said softly, "You're still here. That's power." That night, after Leo fell asleep, I opened the locket my father had given me. Inside was my mother's photo on one side, and now a tiny picture of Leo on the other. I whispered, "We're okay now. Not perfect, not fixed, but okay. And sometimes, that's enough." 2 years later, everything smelled different. The air, the walls, even my own skin. It wasn't the apartment, though it helped. A small second-floor walk-up outside Arlington with squeaky floorboards, pale yellow paint, and a balcony just big enough for 2 chairs and a pot of mint Leo kept overwatering. It wasn't even the new curtains or the soft pillows or the framed quote on the kitchen wall that said, "Peace is not the absence of noise, but the presence of calm." No, it was something internal. A shift. A gentleness I hadn't known I could hold. Leo was 4 now. Bright-eyed, all knees and elbows, loud laughter and sticky fingers. He called strawberries happy bites and believed clouds could whisper to the moon. Some mornings he woke me up with kisses. Other mornings he crept into bed just to be held. And every single day, he reminded me of why I chose to leave. Why I chose me. I had started a small freelance design business. Nothing big, just nursery makeovers and color consultations. Sometimes home office resets for newly divorced women who needed a fresh start. Business grew slow and steady. Word of mouth, kindness, loyalty. I no longer looked over my shoulder. Brandon and Barbara had faded to ghosts. From what I heard, he still lived in Fort Worth, still worked in tech, still existed quietly beneath his mother's shadow. She came back eventually, after her short-lived exile to New Mexico. but they never contacted me again. I think even they knew I had become unreachable, because you can't guilt a woman who's finally made peace with herself. There was a man for a time, Julian, kind eyes, warm voice, a social worker who loved jazz and had a chipped tooth from a soccer accident. We had lunch, a few dinners, one gentle kiss outside my door in early spring. But I wasn't ready, or maybe I was, but not for anything that took me away from the world I'd fought so hard to reclaim. I wrote him a letter thanking him for the softness. He replied, "You don't owe me anything, Madeline. Just keep building that beautiful world of yours." So I did. Every Thursday night, I sat with the support group, the one that held me together when I was unraveling. We met in the basement of a small church, folded chairs, a box of tissues in the center, coffee that tasted like burnt forgiveness. I wasn't the one crying anymore. I listened. I nodded. I held hands. And when new women came in, eyes red, voices small, stories echoing parts of mine, I waited until they finished before sharing. I told them about Barbara, about Brandon, about smoke that filled the room long before it filled the air. And I always ended the same way. You're not crazy. You're not too sensitive. You're not the problem. You're breathing smoke and being told it's fresh air. But you can open the window. You can walk outside. You can start again. Sometimes they cried harder. Sometimes they just stared. But they always came back the next week. And that meant something. One Sunday in early fall, Leo and I went to the park. He wore his red sneakers, the ones with tiny stars on the sides. We packed peanut butter sandwiches and juice boxes and a blanket. The sun was soft, the breeze gentle. He chased butterflies and pretended to be a lion. I watched, legs stretched out, arms behind me, face tilted toward the light. Across the field, a woman lit a cigarette. She stood alone near the fountain, smoke curling around her like a memory. For a second, my lungs clenched, not from the smell, but from the echo of another life. The kitchen window, the smirk, the ashtray by the crib. But it passed. She wasn't Barbara, and I wasn't that woman anymore. I didn't tell her to stop. I didn't get up or flinch. I just looked down at Leo, who had flopped onto the grass beside me, laughing so hard his belly shook. And I smiled, because the smoke didn't own me, because I was already breathing something better. That night, after Leo was asleep, I stood by his door and watched him dream. The stars on his ceiling glowed faintly. I whispered, "You're safe. We're safe." And in the quiet of that moment, I realized the truth. I had spent so long holding my breath, waiting for the next explosion, the next insult, the next invasion. But now, in this little home with its creaky floors and mint leaves and yellow paint, I could finally exhale, a full, steady, unbroken breath. And as it filled my lungs, I knew. Peace doesn't always arrive with trumpets. Sometimes it tiptoes in, wearing red sneakers and whispering about happy bites. Sometimes it smells like mint and paint. And sometimes, just sometimes, it begins the moment you stop asking for permission to breathe. I used to think freedom came with noise, declarations, legal victories. But now I know. True freedom is quiet. It sits beside you in the dark, wraps around your shoulders like a blanket, and waits until you're ready. I was ready, finally. And that's how my story ends. Not with revenge, not with applause, but with peace. Real, warm, earned peace. So if you're out there, reading this, if you're still in the smoke, still waiting for someone to tell you it's okay to want more, let this be your sign. You don't need permission. You just need breath. Take it and run. There are battles we cannot win with words. There are wounds that no apology can heal. And there are people, bound to us by blood, who still become the very poison that suffocates us in our own homes. But Madeline Carter chose a different path. She didn't scream. She didn't strike back with fury. She simply walked away. Walked away to live. Walked away to breathe deeply. Walked away to rebuild a world where her son could grow up surrounded by pure love. Without the smell of smoke. Without insults echoing through the walls. Without suffocating embraces. Sometimes, the deepest form of revenge isn't making someone else suffer. It's letting them witness you living a peaceful life they will never have. If you've ever felt like Madeline, belittled, manipulated, pushed to the point of suffocation, Share just one small thing in the comments below. You don't have to be strong. Just be real. Because who knows? Your story might become someone else's very first breath.